Good morning and welcome to the finance meeting this morning. And we're going to adjust the air conditioners here just a little bit. So that we can hear ourselves think. And the moment you will call for the roll call, please.
Mike Berlin,
Here,
Laura Negro,
Here.
Blake Ellefson,
Here.
Ron Stendor,
Here.
Pat Kinney.
Here.
quorum is present. Are we going to be putting the agenda up on the, here we go. I guess approval of the agenda is in order.
Ron Stender will make a motion. We approve the agenda.
We have Ron making a motion to approve the agenda. Do we have a second?
So moved.
We have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 3 is public comments. Do we have anyone online? Do we have any public comments? One last time, any public comments? Thank you. Approval of the finance meetings of June 28th. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
This is Pat. I'll make a motion to approve.
We have Pat making a motion to approve. Do we have
Ron
a second?
Stender will second.
Ron, we have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Getting right into the agenda. I'll turn the floor over to Dan.
Okay, today we're here to discuss the possibility of collateralizing our opiate payments. With us today is Andy Phillips from the Wisconsin Counties Association, or Tolis Law Firm. And Andy's going to help guide us through this.
Is that my cue, Dan?
It is, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Great to see everybody. I hope that everybody received the packet of information that PMA Financial, PMA Securities sent out. Does everybody have that information? I know, Dan, it looks like you just started a screen share, so perhaps there it is. And so by way of background, and if you could go to the previous slide, Dan. There it is. By way of background, PMA Financial or PMA Securities was hired on to be the municipal advisor for all Wisconsin counties that are considering securitization. The reason they were brought on is that we felt it important that there be an independent third party who is a registered municipal advisor with a fiduciary obligation and relationship with the counties to take a look at the plan of finance as it relates to securitization and really give an honest overview so that all of the counties can make an informed decision about securitization. And so the chart that you see before you here is something that PMA produced. Essentially, what we're talking about with securitization, or at least the plan that we've devised thus far, is that Ashland County is entitled to a little north of $500,000. That's in the column that is in gray shade, says total scheduled LG payment on the left. All right. That total scheduled LG payment is comprised of two different sources. The Janssen settlement provides payments through 2031, and the three distributors, AmerisourceBergen, Cardinal Health, and McKesson, extend their payments out through 2038. And so you add up all of the payments that will be coming to Ashland County through 2038, and it adds up to about $505,000. And so when we look at the payment streams associated with those settlement agreements, we have several counties that are saying, look, I don't want to wait 18 years to get $500,000. What can I get if I securitize? And what does the payment stream look like in that circumstance? Because I want to put that money to work right now. And so that's where PMA came in and did a county by county analysis of what securitization looks like. And I want to make sure I'm very clear on this as well. When I say securitization, what happens here is that if Ashland County says, yes, I'd like to go forward with this plan, Ashland County would actually sell its entitlement to these revenue streams to a third party, the Public Finance Authority. The Public Finance Authority is a Wisconsin entity that is authorized to issue bonds around the country. The Public Finance Authority would issue bonds backed by the revenue stream it just purchased from Ashland County. The investors who purchase those bonds are going to pay a purchase price. That purchase price is what actually comes back to Ashland County as payment for the revenue stream. All right. So it's not going to be a situation where Ashland County is pledging its full faith and credit. It's not a general obligation debt. It's not even a revenue-backed debt of Ashland County. This will have no impact on Ashland County's debt limitations, credit ratings, or anything of the sort. This is an outright sale of the revenue stream to the Public Finance Authority, a third party. And so when we look at the attributes of securitization, those are the columns on the right of this sheet. And so we see that if Ashland County decides to securitize, and I'm going to start with the very big global numbers first. On the right, you see a column, total estimated LG payment. That's the payment coming into Ashland County. The total of those payments is just shy of $400,000, okay? And so by securitizing, Ashland County is essentially foregoing about $100,000 over the course of 18 years. Of course, we know that money today is not the same as money 18 years from now. And so we have to look at present value calculations for that money. When we look at the Janssen scheduled payments, we know that those payments, for the most part, come in before 2026. So really, we're looking at a 3 to 4 year horizon on those payments. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to securitize those payments because we're going to get those payments here in the next 3 to 4 years. And so we've excluded, or I shouldn't say we, PMA is recommending that counties exclude the Janssen payments from the securitization mechanism. Instead, PMA is saying, let's look at securitizing the distributor schedule payments, again, those payments that extend out until 2038. And so when we look at the proceeds associated with that, it's $203,837. Again, the first two payments from the distributors are going to come in this year, and so there's no need to securitize those. So any payments in 2023 through 2038 are securitized. That's the $203,837. And then you see in the column immediately to the right of the proceeds column, as it relates to securitization, that's labeled residual. There is, in the plan of finance, there is a coverage requirement associated with the bonds that PFA is going to issue. In other words, the investors want some sort of hedge against the risk that the distributors either don't make the payments, they face insolvency, or something happens to the revenue stream that is being purchased. The hedge means that there is going to be 1.2 times coverage on the bond payments. So we think about how the amount that is due on the bonds is comprised of principal and interest, and then there is an extra 20% that is set aside in case the world comes crashing in and nobody makes a payment. Right? That 20% set aside, assuming the distributors make all of the scheduled payments, that 20% set aside is going to come back to Ashland County. And that's what you see there with the estimated residual payments coming back over the course of 18 years. I don't know where and when in the plan that money comes back? In other words, is it an annual calculation? Is it every 2 years? Is it every 3 years? I don't know that for certain. I do know that the county will not have to wait until 2038 to receive those funds, but we believe it's going to be annual. And so it's reflected in this chart as an annual return to the county. And so when you add up the totals from the Janssen payment, this year's distributor payments, the proceeds of securitization, plus the residuals, we have the total payment column on the right, and then we have a present value calculation associated with those total payments. And you will notice, for example, in 2022, Ashland County is set to receive $236,876. The present value is $236,876. Once you start going further down the line, you see that in 2038, when Ashland County receives $3,806, the present value is $2,342. The discount rate used for the present value calculation that PMA undertook, the discount rate is the US Treasury rate. And the reason that PMA used that is the investment return that Ashland County could expect should it take the money and reinvest as opposed to spending it. And so it used the US Treasury discount rate. And so when we look at the value of securitization from a present value standpoint, we see that the return, just looking at apples to apples, present value to present value, is 71%. That's just the nominal payments, the discount off of, it's not present value, it's 71% of the total value of the payments compared to the total value associated with securitization. If we look at present value, it's a little north of 85%. And so when we think about the 15% that is quote unquote lost here, it really is a reflection of the assumption of risk of non-payment by the investors as opposed to the county. If you didn't securitize and the distributors went bankrupt and ceased making payments, you get no further money. If you do securitize and the distributors make no further payment, you get to keep whatever money that you've received as a result of the sale of that revenue stream. You, of course, would give up that residual payment column because there would be no additional money coming in. But Ashland County is not on the hook for anything having to do with the original payment for the revenue stream so that the securitization could take place. And so when we look at this, in my mind, from a policymaker's viewpoint, the reasons that you would securitize, number one, you eliminate that risk of non-payment. But number two, it gives the county a chunk of proceeds up front so that when you go into your budget for 2023 and want to speak to this concept of abatement as it relates to the opioid epidemic, you have over $200,000 to dedicate toward that venture of abatement, as opposed to having in the neighborhood of $20,000 to do so. So that's an overview of the securitization process, and I'm happy to, as best I can, go through other analyses or spreadsheets if you'd like, but maybe I'll stop here, Dan, and see if you have questions or comments, or if any members of the committee might have questions or comments as well.
I'll defer to the committee right now for the time being. I'm sure they have questions.
I had a question on the US Treasury return.
Mm-hmm.
So are you using the 10-year, the 3-year, the 30-year, and then?
I think it's, yeah, I mean, Blake, I went to law school because I didn't do math, so forgive me, but I believe PMA used the 5-year Treasury return because that's the horizon for county investment purposes. But I don't know for certain on that.
And then as rates are changing here quite rapidly, as the Fed kind of, is this actually the numbers that are gonna be real? So like, I know this is an estimate in the beginning, but you know, the Fed's on the hook for raising another 3/4 of a point here upcoming. So can we count on these numbers being pretty accurate?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that what PMA did is took a conservative approach, understanding the rate environment. But to your point, we're in a very unstable rate environment right now. So I think these numbers could shift and switch. I will tell you that if Ashland County said today, hey, we're interested in pursuing this, everything is not going to be final until November or December timeframe. And so at that point in time, you may take a look and say, this makes no sense. We're paying way too much to securitize. We're out. That's fine. I think that what we're looking for, or I know what we're looking for from the viewpoint of Citigroup and Oric Harrington Bond Council and PMA, is what counties are interested so we can actually start putting the actual documentation together, understanding that everything would have to come back to this committee and the Ashland County Board for final approval. And so I don't know what the rate is going to be when these are finally priced. And when I say priced, meaning that the bonds have to be sold and there has to be a price tag associated with that sale. I don't know what the bonds are going to price at given rate structure, but I know that PMA took a pretty conservative view on this.
Anyone else?
This is Pat. Blake, you asked some questions that I think are really relevant as we do this. So one of the things I'm hearing from Andy is what you're looking for is if we want to, for the moment at least, consider securitizing this, but we would have an option as late as November or so to make a final decision. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, yes.
Okay, so yeah, the whole rate environment it's hard to know what's coming, but it certainly looks like they're going up. But I think from the county, the other thing we should consider is how much of this money are we going to use in the next few years? The settlements are, more front loaded to the next few years. Are we going to need and use a significant amount of that money in the coming few years? Or is it going to be spread out more uniformly over 20 years? The reason I'm asking that is, it's one thing to say, here's what the county might get if we invest it, but the other question is, well, how long would we invest it and have it set aside for these purposes? And I'm wondering if Laura, being on public property and law enforcement, might have some insights.
We've needed the medicated assisted treatment for a long time now, and I've been pushing for that for the last 2 years. So I lean towards securitizing this. I know the whole theory of, getting the penny a day versus the $1 million and such. But as a county, we have an immediate need for help for our citizens. And I think okaying this right now to be part of it, to like you said, if we need to, we can back out later. But that gives us time to start putting together partnerships, because not only does the sheriff's department need to deal with this, but I think our health and human services needs to be involved. And I think we need a regional partnership to do the best that we can with this money for all of our counties. Because throwing a little money directly at one program isn't going to help us, but developing a regional strategy. And so between now and the end of the year, we should get a plan in place, and we need to have those steps moving as we talk about this. So I would support securitizing it.
And let me ask you this in particular. So if we don't securitize, we see the stream of payments there. Do you think those would be sufficient to put the programs in place that we need? And when I say programs in place that we need, I'm also thinking about the cost of not doing that, higher incarceration rates and the burden on health and human services, et cetera.
My thought is let's get this moving. Let's see what the securitization looks like. We've got that time to build those partnerships. And then as a region, we can decide to pull the trigger at the end too. Whatever we do, we need to do it well thought out. We need partnerships with the region, and it's not, and any counties around us, along with the 2 tribes, and actually develop a good plan for our people. And the quicker that happens, the more I can answer that question.
Okay.
Just one other question and making sure that I understood this correct. The attorney fees were after the settlement, and that I believe the attorneys may have waived their charging of us on these settlements if we get them. Is that correct? Does anyone have that confirmed?
Well, I can address that because I'm one of the attorneys in that group. And so what happened is the attorneys waived their 25% fee off of this and agreed to a 20% cap. And so the 20% cap is taken off and these payments reflect net to the county.
So Andy, going to what Supervisor Negro was saying, just so the committee understands completely, there would be nothing preventing us from joining with Bayfield County and Price County to do a multi-county program with this money.
No, that's a good point, Dan. And that was very important when we negotiated the terms of the legislation that was adopted last summer. And it's in 165.12 of the statutes, is that there would be nothing prohibiting counties from joining with one another in the utilization of these funds.
Are there, it seems like the majority of counties are signing on. Is there a percentage that you're seeing so far that have signed up?
Yeah, I think we were at 20 as of last Friday, and we have another 3 from yesterday. We're in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 counties that have said, yes, let's proceed. I mean, nobody has called me and said, no, we're not interested in taking the next step. I'll put it that way.
I kind of wanted to go back to what Pat and Laura were talking about, in that, to get all this money up front and to spend it all isn't really the long-term kind of solution, because then now we have to throw more money at it that's not a part of this stream. So I just think that if we do take this as which I'm leaning towards as well as taking the abatement up front, we just have to have a real strong plan with Health and Human Services, the police, and just make sure that that money is going to be set up long-term thinking, and not just, hey, we're going to do this all up front. And I'm sure you guys are thinking the same way.
Andy, if we were to take the abatement, can the money be placed into an interest-bearing account?
Yes, it can be invested. Yes.
Is the investment income limited to having to be used on opiate on the terms of the settlement?
My impression of the settlement agreement, as I've read the terms, is that yes, any interest earnings would be dedicated toward abatement. I will say that the approved uses list, which is an exhibit to the settlement agreement, I believe you have that, Dan, it's very, very broad. And so even though it's restricted in terms of use, it's a pretty broad restriction, as I recall.
For the committee, the abatement, the Schedule E, which Andy was referring to, is on the website under this meeting. If anybody wants to see it, if you need a printed copy, please let me know.
The other thing I will say is that I've had conversations with the Counties Association and the National Association of Counties, frankly, about having some sort of summit later this summer to provide a platform and opportunity for counties to all come together and talk about what are counties doing and what are some abatement activities that are useful that we've found to be successful and things like that. So the goal being to provide you with additional resources so you're not just sitting there with a blank sheet of paper thinking of different ways that the money could be utilized. At least give you some examples and best case scenarios, worst case scenarios for utilization. So we're going to continue to work on that at the association level.
Is there any correlation between the amount of payments and the years that it's stretched out with the anticipated need for services related to opioids? Or is that just no correlation there?
Again, I was not involved in the settlement discussion, so you're receiving second and at times third-hand information. But my understanding is that all it was an accommodation so that the distributors would be able to make these payments without going bankrupt.
So then I guess on the county end, before we get to November, I'd like to have some idea of anticipated need going forward. When we look at 2038, I have no idea how much opioids are going to be an issue. Is it going to be pretty much a thing of the past, or are we still going to be, somewhat knee deep? I don't know, because that would have a bearing then on how we would invest that money and set it aside so that we have money for services over a longer period of time, which could go beyond 2038 too, if there's still anticipated need past then.
Go ahead, Laura.
Well, part of that is if we don't start doing something as a region soon, we'll definitely have a lot of this in 2038. I think having that summit is absolutely invaluable, Andy. Thank you and the counties association for doing that. I mean, all of us trying to have the best strategy to deal with this is the best way to go, because like I've said before with the ARPA money, we don't want to be lottery winners with this stuff and just piddle it away. The only other question I had was just, I have from PMA, a Wisconsin local government percentage allocation. How were those percentages done? Was that according to how many of the opioids were in the area and the problems you dealt with? Or is it just, here's some counties, here's a population, we're dividing it down according to that?
Oh my gosh, that was a complicated process. And here's why it was complicated, is that when they settled, it was a nationwide settlement. And there was a whole group of experts that got together and assigned percentages to all of the state and local governments throughout the country. And in assigning those percentages, they were looking at basically three attributes: population, opioid distribution within that area, and then impacts of opioid overuse or abuse within that area based upon deaths, reported health instances, and things of that nature. And so it was really an expert calculation of what has been the impact of opioids on a particular area. And that all sounds great, and it worked all around the country except for Wisconsin, because in Wisconsin, we have legislation on the books that says only the parties that litigated this case have the ability to share in the proceeds of the settlement. And of course, I'm biased. The County Association is biased. We think counties have done the heavy lifting as it relates to dealing with the opioid epidemic. And so we think the counties are the entities that deserve the lion's share of the proceeds associated with any settlement. And so with the nationwide calculation, we had the actual opioid attributes or the percentages attributable to each county, but then we also have percentages attributable to each city, town, and village within the county. And so we had to roll up the city, town, and village numbers up to the county level in order to make it a calculation. Well, the other complication we have in Wisconsin is that we had 16 municipal entities that sued, and so they're entitled to a share of the proceeds. And so rolling up those 16 into the county where those 16 are didn't seem entirely fair to the counties where those municipalities were. For example, we had Mount Pleasant in Racine County that sued. And so rolling Mount Pleasant figures and using those figures and then deducting it from Racine County still didn't seem like the right result, because Racine County's problems are the same problems that Ashland County is facing from a health perspective, human service perspective, sheriff's office perspective, all of those things. And so what we did is we tried to spread the cost of the municipal involvement evenly across all counties. And so when we think about what does this mean for Ashland County, you see it's 0.225%. According to the national figures, if Wisconsin was like every other state that participated in the settlement, Ashland County's number would be more like 0.1%. But it's 0.225% because the city of Ashland, for example, is not included within the allocation. So city of Ashland's numbers were rolled up to Ashland County. So the amount that Ashland County is receiving is far greater in proportion than a similar sized county in any other state, if that makes sense. And so we started with very scientific data and then extrapolated based upon the unique attributes of the Wisconsin landscape, if you will, as it relates to only litigating entities participating.
Thank you.
So this is Mike for a question toward Dan. Whatever the decision the Finance Committee makes today, this needs to go to the Executive Committee and County Board?
No, but this, because we're not committing to anything, we can just go from finance to say that the county is interested. If we're going to finalize it, then a resolution needs to pass the entire county board.
Okay.
So this is
Karen?
actually, to be honest, this is a decision Chairman Pufal and I can make by ourselves. But we wanted to bring it to finance so there's greater input.
Laura?
Do we want a motion to move ahead with the process of securitization?
I was going to ask the question, are we prepared to make that motion?
I am prepared to make that motion.
We have a motion on the floor. Blake, you got something?
I second that motion.
Further discussion?
This is Pat. So Andy, you mentioned in November, you anticipated you'd have firmer numbers. Can you, and our budget typically would get passed in November. Could you give us a little more detail, if you can, on the timeline of this and how much time we would have to decide yes or no when we get to that point? And I'm thinking in large part about Blake's comments about the Federal Reserve. We know interest rates are going to go up, but it's hard to say what they'll be in November and what we might anticipate where they go from there.
Yeah, and so I was pressing hard with the city folks and Orc Harrington Bond Council on this to find out from a timing perspective, when can we anticipate having this deal closed? And so if I know when the deal is going to be closed, I know when it's going to price and when everything is going to be put together. So they think that if we can start with documenting this program at the end of this month, we can get this closed by the end of December. And so if we think about that, we know that the bonds will price at the beginning of December because nothing happens with capital markets over the holiday period. So we know that they'd have to price at the beginning of December. And so we would have a much better idea of where things are going to shake out in terms of the actual dollars, probably toward the end of November.
And then I guess the other thing that we should be aware of is as interest rates rise, the present value amount that the county would receive is going to decline. So whatever numbers we're looking at here are likely larger than what we're going to look at in December.
With that being said, no further discussion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I think we
Right.
should do a
Right.
roll call just to make sure.
Okay, we can do a roll call.
Lori, can you please call the roll?
Mike Berlin,
Yes,
Laura Negro,
Yes,
Blake Ellefson,
Yes.
Ron Stendor,
Yes.
Pat Kinney,
Yes.
I'm sorry, did we get muted, Dan? Oh, there you are.
Sorry, I was. Andy, do you need anything else from me or is this sufficient?
This is sufficient. I will let the team know that Ashland County is interested in getting further information in pursuance of final documentation. So I will let everybody know. And along the way, if you have questions, concerns, comments, reach out to the association, reach out to me. And whatever information you need, we'll make sure you have it, okay?
Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great Tuesday.
Thank you.
you
thank
too.
you.
So I do think that the two numbers we need to look at going forward are, yes, interest rates, but also inflation rate. If inflation continues at the rate it's going, and we all know inflationary periods last generally 2 or 3 years, the value of that money is going to just disappear completely. So that's another issue to look at.
If they all default on it, we're not going to get anything anyways, or they say, find a way to file bankruptcy or run away anyhow. So, you know, until we're locked in with the securitization or wherever we're going, we still have that as a possibility.
There is a lot of risk associated with some of the distributors in particular. So. The one thing I should also point out is this is just the first of 3 lawsuits. There's still a lawsuit against the manufacturers. So that'd be like Purdue Pharma, J&J again, and some other companies. And there's also lawsuits against the Walgreens and CVS's of the world. So all of those are still proceeding. So we may be back at this decision again in a year or 2 years or 3 years, whatever.
So, are we- excuse me, are we ready for the next item?
So as you go through preparing the budget, because this securitization wouldn't happen, it sounds like till December, and the budget would be passed then. For budget purposes, are you planning on putting money in the budget from a source other than this? And then possibly replacing it, or?
No, because this money has to be in addition to what we'd normally spend. So I would not include the money in next year's budget. If we were going to spend it, then I would come to the county board as a whole and do a budget amendment to add it in.
So back to the inflation question, anticipating higher costs for these services, all things being equal, can we use this to offset inflation, you know, the cost due to inflation?
In a manner of speaking, so say if Narcan costs us $1,000 today, and when we go to buy it next year at this time, it's $1,200. Yeah, we can use the $200 because we're using it towards opiate abatement and above the level budgeted.
The other thing that, as we get towards budget season, I'd want to look at is, you know, it's one thing to say, what can we earn if we invest this money? It's also, I think, going to be important to look at, if we end up borrowing money, what would that cost us? If we take the settlement, does that help us reduce our borrowing costs? And I don't know the answer to that yet, but.
Well, our borrowing costs are going up. I can tell you what the borrowing costs are today. At your next meeting next week, you'll be getting being asked for permission to take out a loan for the highway department. They're going to get the grader they're asking for. And Northern State Bank's giving us a loan at 2.5% for 5 years. So that's what we are today. This year, next year at this time, it could be 3.5% or 4% easily.
I have a question about the Health and Human Services side. So if we're budgeting for next year,
Mhm.
is any of this money going to get, I know we're not going to get it, but are we going to start putting it into their budget planning for the future? So as soon as that money gets here, we can start this program like day one. And then that gets back to the Health and Human Services. They're obviously kind of hearing about this money possibly coming. What are they going to have a really transparent plan that we're all going to be able to see before the budget? Is that kind of how we're doing this? I guess I'm sorry, I'm new, so I'm asking these questions, but I'm just curious how this is all going to tie together.
Yeah, you're going to see exactly where and how they're planning to spend it. Now, I want to point out, it doesn't necessarily all have to go to HHS. It can go to the sheriff's department too, because we are looking at opioid abatement as a whole. So Terry Barningham has a copy of Exhibit A or E that lists all the appropriate uses. I gave it to her as soon as I got it. I asked her to start planning. You know, here's how much we're getting, start planning on how you think we should use it. You know, going back to Mr. Kenny's question, we could create a specific line item in the budget that says opioid abatement and fund it with what we expect the amount to be. And if we don't get the money, we can't spend it until we get the cash. But that way we will be able to hit the ground running right away too. And there are a number of ways to do it. But yes, there will have to be a specific plan for this money. Because we're going to have to account for it at some point somehow.
And then as it relates to the finance committee next week meeting, it would be kind of helpful just to see a general picture, maybe for myself, and maybe you gave it to us, but I just like to see the asset liability, kind of the balance sheet of Ashland County, and then possibly a high level, maybe income, expense, not that it needs to be perfect, but just again, just so I'm kind of getting a sense of what has Ashland County done, and maybe we're not there yet, so maybe I'm asking for the wrong thing, but it just helps just getting a sense of the picture of Ashland County, because I hear mixed things, and so I just want to make sure I'm seeing everything I should as this committee continues to kind of grow with me.
Yep. I could tell you, everybody in this room has been asking for the exact same thing. And I could tell you that technically what's happened is our chart of accounts is not set up the way wasn't set up the way it needs to be to actually pull that report. Our vendor is fixing our chart of accounts as we speak. They should be, well, Steve, one of our consultants is here today. I'll ask him exactly when he expects to be done. But as soon as that's done, we should be able to get easy reports, and we can customize them however you want, and they will get emailed to you every month automatically from the software. So you won't even need to ask for it. It'll just get there. So I'm hoping that happens, we're in July now, so yet this month yet. Supervisor Nagro's chuckling over there because she's asking the same thing.
I've been kind of pushing for that stuff for the last couple of years or so. So I'm right with you, Blake. And to, you talked about Health and Human Services, Blake. I definitely see a need for that summit to see how everybody else is going to move through it too, to see what the best plan of attack is, especially with the research from Counties Association. And then also that cooperation between the Sheriff's Department and Health and Human Services to help us determine on the ground level here what kind of things that they see, and some of the, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all the different process to try to figure this out. So that's why I said, and as we've been talking about this since there was any kind of national announcement, we first talked about it at any county board meetings. I've been pushing for some kind of coalition or group or something. So I'm glad that WCA and Andy kind of stepped up and are going to give us this forum, because we can't know everything, but it'll give us a good jump off, I would think. Otherwise, on the agenda, I did notice our next meeting's on a Thursday. Are we going to decide if it's a Tuesday or Thursday so I can put it on a calendar? So,
I'll make that an agenda item for next meeting.
Oh, good, because I will love that. Because really, I just need to, if we're gonna have like third Thursday or every other whatever, can we just schedule them out? Because
Yep, we'll put it on the agenda for you.
yeah, thank you guys. And I apologize for being missing last time.
I think we're at the next item. The next item on the agenda. The next item is,
I'll make the motion to close the meeting.
motion made to adjourn. We have a second.
Ron Stender,
I'll make
second.
it.
Ron seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, seems